Tri-State Freethinkers podcast lecture series from February 3rd, 2016, Polyamory, a more in-depth look, featuring speaker Leslie Knickers.
Anyway, my name is Leslie, and my husband and I, along with another member of the audience, Bird, helped to start the Cincinnati Polyamory Meetup group about a year and a half ago. And polyamory is simply defined as being open to the possibility of multiple loves. So if you're married, if you're not married, if you're single, you have multiple partners, perhaps you have different connections with them. They can be emotional connections, sexual connections, a ginormous blending of all of them. Polyamory, a more in-depth look. I like this. Poly what? What? Poly, what are you talking about? Multiple loves. That's the, I guess, breaking down the word, poly, multiple. Where'd it go? All right. Consensual, which is very important, ethical and responsible practice of non-monogamy. So I like this one. So generally, if I tell somebody I'm polyamorous, this is what they think. You just have people in and out, and in and out, in and out of your life, in and out of your bed. Or they think that we're Mormon and that I'm a member of a harem and I am wearing a long dress, but I do cut my hair occasionally. It really boils down to scheduling. It's crazy. So what it isn't, sometimes it's easier to start there. It isn't cheating. Generally, if you hear, well, I've got a girlfriend or I've got a boyfriend, you're thinking, that's on the side. Nope. In poly, it needs to be on the table. All the members of a poly group need to know that all the other members exist. If they don't know that, well, that's cheating, and that's breaking, I guess, one of the rules. It's also not just about sex. A lot of times, polyamory is about connecting with people outside of sex. So it's perhaps you feel like you have a need for different kind of connection, just a more of a friendly, more romantic, minus the sex. Polyamory. It also generally is not swinging, although there is some crossover. So swinging generally involves clubs and relationships that do not exist outside of a swing club or swing parties. Polyamory is about building relationships with people in everyday life, not just about sex and not hidden. All right. Nope, not polygamy. I like this slide. I don't know if you can see it well, but it is Princess Leia. But no, you can't have a harem. I guess you could, but good luck with that. And it's not because someone has an inability to commit. A lot of times it takes far more commitment when you have multiple relationships with people to be fair to them, to give them time, to give them affection and energy. You have to be willing to commit to that, or it would just be exhausting all the time. Fine, what is it? You could be open to the possibilities of loving more than one person, like I said earlier. Connection, again, romantic, obviously, sexual, sometimes, platonic, or a mix. In my experience, it's a mix. Sometimes relationships start out platonic or friends, and then you maybe have some romance, or maybe you just have a sexual connection, and you're free to explore that. And there are more relationship models in polyamory than I could count, but I'm going to go over some of the main ones. So the V. So if you think Beth, married to Steve, but she has a boyfriend named Paul. So Beth would be the point in the V. Steve, Paul would be the arms. They may or may not connect. I guess traditionally that's what people think, or they think the triad, where Beth, Stephen, and Paul are all involved intimately, sexually. It's all a giant puppy pile. That's the other thing. And polycule is a relatively new word that I like, but it generally helps describe all these different connections that can happen within a poly group. And the poly group could be 2 or 3 people. It could be 10, 12, 15, different people, different numbers of people, different types of relationships. So it's not always sexual. Like I said, it's not always romantic. I have a good slide about that right here. So I couldn't keep track of this, and this is from a website, but you have a central person and then different types of connections, and it branches out from there. That's exactly why Google Calendar is a good thing. You can schedule all your stuff. So the last one I'm going to talk about is a mono-poly combo. So you have one person that wants to be monogamous, but is supportive that their partner may be polyamorous, and that person may want to have other partners, and the monogamous partner, generally, it takes quite a bit of adjustment, but they're okay with it, or okay with some therapy and lots of work. Back to how do you make it work? So communication. I have learned so many different ways to communicate. If you've heard of the 5 love languages, that's a great place to start. So if you haven't heard of it, there are different ways to communicate. It could be touch, it could be gifts, it could be sacrificing of your time and that kind of things. Some people like oral communication. Some people want to have you send a text or an email so that they have an ability to process what you're saying. But this goes back to, you have to, in poly, give voice to your needs and your feelings. And there is no better way to find out what you want and need than having to express it. Honesty, well, that's a big part. So if you're dishonest, well, that goes back to cheating. That doesn't work. Because transparency, it only works if everything is out on the table. If you're hiding something, cheating, not polyamory. Consent is something I haven't covered before when I've done talks like this. So it's easily overlooked, especially if you're new to poly and you think that you just have a free pass to do whatever. Because there are sexual connections, if you do not have implicit consent from somebody, then the answer is no. If you open yourself up to being exposed to STDs, to being exposed to emotional connections with people, you put quite a lot of trust in a person. And if you are with a married couple and you said, okay, I'm going to be polyamorous. Okay. So let's say I decide I'm going to go on a date. My husband knows about that. That's just fine. No problem. If I then have sex on the date, I do not tell my husband, and then I am intimate with him again, I've taken away his ability to consent to that type of sexual connection, because now he is connected to the person that I had sex with, and he didn't even know about it. That's a huge thing. Sexually, because of disease, but also emotionally, because generally when you have sex with someone, there is some sort of emotional connection. Hard to come back from that and build trust if it's been broken. Okay. Sometimes you hear talks about rules and agreements. Rules, and especially a veto, generally is set by like a couple when they decide, okay, we're going to be polyamorous. We're going to set these 15 rules in place to protect our relationship from any outside influence. If so-and-so comes into it, I don't like the person, I have the ability to tell my husband or whoever, nope, they're gone, because that's a rule. We have this veto rule. Generally, that works out very badly, because if you've made the connection and then your partner says, nope, you can't have that connection because I don't like the person, animosity is bad. Agreements, easier to handle but harder to negotiate sometimes. Everybody has input. So if we have a new person coming in, then they have the ability to help us make guidelines, things we will or will not do without consent from all parties involved. Time management is insane, and I am definitely not the best at this. But Google Calendar, again, is awesome. And quality of your time that you spend a lot of times has to trump quantity, because if you are a married couple that has children, or if you're in a polycule family that lives together, maybe there are 4 of you and some children, you're obviously going to spend the majority of your time there. If you have outside relationships, perhaps you can't give them the same amount of hours a day, but the quality has to be there.
All right. We have the Piggest Raffle is one way that we can raise money to help do all the great things that we do at the Tri-State Freethinkers. So if you go to piggestraffle.com, you can buy a pig for $5, and you can that money goes directly to the Tri-State Freethinkers, and you're entered into a raffle to where you could potentially win $5,000 for you and $5,000 for us. So it is the gift that kind of keeps on giving. And there's also a lease of a Toyota Prius and lots of other great prizes that you could win. So please go to piggestraffle.com, buy a piggy, and help us.
I'm Jim Helton, president of the Tri-State Freethinkers. Please come support us at www.tristatefreethinkers.com. With that, we do great things like feed the homeless. We also throw birthday parties for homeless kids and do science-based speakers every month. So join us at the tristatefreethinkers.com.
Another thing I think that gets overlooked when you're like, yes, I went to this Poly 101 thing and it sounds awesome, we're totally going to do that. So you get really caught up in the fantasy. If you think that all these people are going to meet the needs, I've been missing all this the whole time, you have to remember that the people that you're seeing are people, and they have feelings, and you have to take that into account. Otherwise, you're just going to leave a swath of destruction, and that's never good. Okay, poly pitfalls, but what about jealousy? I'm human, so I've been jealous multiple times. I think every polyamorous person struggles with jealousy until you find what it is that is causing it, and that can sometimes be different with every single relationship that you are in. And deconstructing that feeling is painful, but completely doable. I like that one, green-eyed person. Sorry. So, this is Franklin Veaux is one of the foremost contemporary voices on ethical polyamory. And his quote, "Externalizing your feelings and assuming that you have a right to be comfortable all the time is neither reasonable nor compassionate," is very, very applicable. A lot of times emotions are illogical, and we have to find why. If I feel jealous, am I really jealous, or am I insecure? Am I afraid of something? Am I being mistreated? What is actually triggering the jealousy? So I personally do not like it if I feel like a partner is paying a whole bunch of attention to someone who is my opposite, if that makes any sense. Because then I think, okay, well, if you like someone who's completely different than me, how in the world have we been connected for this amount of time? So I know that that triggers my insecurity. I still have not gotten to the root cause of it, but I'm working on it. Fear, and I will say comparison, a lot of times sucks any joy that might be out there out of polyamory, because you're like, okay, what if they're going to do something with this person and they haven't done it with me? Or what if he or she falls in love with this person and they forget that I exist? Well, you have to talk about it, and you have to talk about it right now. And that can be very hard because we don't like to sound like we're irrational, especially if we are trying to get in touch with all of these feelings. We don't want to sound crazy, but you have to. Communication is key to anything polyamorous. But with the caveat, sometimes we have alarm bells for a reason, and not everybody means well. Just like, I don't know so much the freethinkers, but any type of fringe group does attract people that don't always have your best interest in mind. So staying optimistic but cautious is generally not a bad thing. Insecurity. I would say, in my experience, that most jealousy is triggered by insecurity. So one of the ways around that is to practice security. What makes you feel safe? What makes you feel unsafe? You have to talk about that. You have to find it. And you, a lot of times, have to be willing to look at some ugly monsters in your own self in order to open yourself up to truly being able to love multiple people. Comparison. Okay, what if she is better at, okay, whatever. We've had lots of examples than me, then you won't love me. Okay, well, people aren't interchangeable. And that is maybe one of the hardest things to remember in poly, but very important. So if your partner, if your relationships are secure, you have to be cool that they love you for this reason, and anybody else coming in will add to your life and not take away, not replace. So now I have a couple resources, and I can make this slideshow available to anybody that wants it, but I think I've got like...
Yes, I understand that my whole life is just a blink of an eye. The history of the earth is with each moment that goes by. But this moment that I'm with you, it feels like time has stood still. It feels somehow like it matters, and that it always will. Thank you so much.